Today's episode is sponsored by newspapers.com, the largest online newspaper archive. Newspapers.com makes it easy to find your family's story with more than 500 million digitized newspaper pages from the 1690s to today. Search for obituaries, marriage and birth announcements, photos, and more in papers from across the U.S., the UK, Canada, and beyond, stretching back 3 centuries. For listeners of this podcast, newspapers.com is offering 20% off a Publisher Extra subscription. Just use the code Genealogy Adventure at checkout. That code is Genealogy Adventure for 20% off Publisher Extra.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Genealogy Adventures. I'm Brian Sheffy.
And I'm Donya Williams. We have an awesome show lined up for you guys today.
We do indeed. And because we have a lot of ground to cover, we're just going to get straight into it. But as always, thank you so much for spending the next hour with us. And we all hope that you're having an enjoyable 3-day holiday weekend. So today, we're talking to Ron Lacks. And Ron Lacks is the grandson of the late Henrietta Lacks and is the author of the book Henrietta Lacks, The Untold Story. His late grandmother, Henrietta Lacks, was an African-American woman whose cancer cells are the source of the HeLa, that's H-E-L-A cell line. The first known immortalized human cell line referred to as the most important cell line in the history of medical research. Her cells advanced cancer and scientific research and led to the development of vaccines, including the polio vaccine, HPV, COVID-19, and countless more. Henrietta's story has been the subject of books and movies that has included some inaccurate facts about the persona who his grandmother was. A U.S. Army veteran, Ron was motivated to write his book to give an accurate account of who she was as a person. Ron became the sole executor of the Henrietta Lacks estate in 2021 and embarked on the mission of sharing, restoring, and preserving the true legacy of his grandmother and the Lacks family. In revealing the untold story, Ron corrects the profile of his grandmother from being portrayed as a typical, inaccurate stereotype of a poor, illiterate Black woman. Ron wants the world to see her in her true image as an educated, beautiful Black woman that had a wealth of land and family. And much like our previous show about the 3 mothers of modern gynecology, Anarcha, Lucia, and Betsy, I invite you to think of Henrietta Lacks as the mother of modern medicine. And with that, welcome to the show, Ron.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, that made me tear up.
Well, it is an absolute honor to have you on the show and thank you so much for having this conversation with us.
It's my pleasure. I've been crying for a long time now, trying to get my family honor back. Henrietta's legacy.
I understand that. I think that is very tragic. So, guys, this is the book, and I really want you to get it. I want you to read it, and it's called Henrietta Lacks, The Untold Story, and he tells you some really good stuff in here. And the fact that he doesn't have control over his own legacy, it blows my mind. I can't imagine that.
I have to say, it is an awesome book, and I couldn't put it down. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't answer emails. I was hooked. So it is a superbly written book. I wanted to start, and basically this is a history that involves both Virginia and the Johns Hopkins Medical Facility in Maryland. And I just want to really go into the very beginning of this story, just to put it in context for our audience. So your grandmother had her last child, your uncle Abdul. I have his name correct, do I?
Right, yes.
And it just seemed like within a matter of weeks of giving birth, she knew that something was wrong with her body. And I guess she was experiencing pain.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to Johns Hopkins. And if you can kind of take the story from there.
Well, she was having pain in her abdomen that she knows she wanted to go get seen. But, back then, Black people wasn't getting good medical care. So she was skeptical about where she wanted to go. Because her doctor in Turner Station, I can't think of his name right offhand, but he was treating her and he recommended her to go to Johns Hopkins to get seen and find out what was going on. So from there, that's when she found out that she had cervical cancer.
Mm-hmm. And from the book, I gathered she was initially actually misdiagnosed because she was diagnosed with a malignant epidermoid carcinoma of the cervix.
Correct.
But what she actually had was adenocarcinoma. And it sounds like the treatment that she was given at the time was just horrific. She literally had radium tubes inserted inside of her.
Yes, she did. Yes, she did. And that's why the family is skeptical about what really killed her, because the radiation bars and the cancer, her cells was fighting off the cancer. So, we was wondering if she would have overcame that.
Has the family looked into whether that treatment, the radium tubes, would have even been effective against the correct diagnosis of adenocarcinoma?
No, we haven't looked into that. Like I said, doors are starting to be opened up now since my book. So people are paying attention and seeing this injustice firsthand. I mean, because for years, everything been swept under the rug from Henrietta to my family. This poor, uneducated Black woman that signed her name was an X. I had to put in my book her John Hancock so people could see that she had beautiful penmanship.
True. Not only could she write, she signed her, she wrote cursive.
Yes.
Let me say this to you. When I did some of the search on there, it points out one of the things that the census record does. It points out if you went to school, how long you went to school. In some instances, it also points out if you can read, if you can write. For her, it did everything. Mm-hmm. So I want to clear that up for everybody. Along with you, I want to piggyback. Her census records show she could read, she could write, she attended school.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So picking up with the book by Rebecca Skloot, and I want to preface this statement because I have ancestors who were poor, who were legitimately poor. They were sharecroppers, and I think a lot of African Americans kind of, they know what that existence was like. There is nothing wrong with being poor.
No.
My ancestors who were poor, they were still, people of faith, people of spirituality. They didn't thieve, they didn't drink, all of the stuff that's associated with being poor, and specifically poor and Black. Mm-hmm. I think that's just kind of storytelling laziness. Mm-hmm. But the fact is, your family owns the land. Your grandparents owned the land that their house stood on. They own their house. They own their land. Now, again, you've already touched on Jim Crow. You've already touched on racism. Just because they may not have had a 25-room mansion, they still had their own land and their own home. And they were already doing better than so many Black families by having those two things in that time period.
Exactly. I mean, Black folks was always a happy people. I mean, regardless how little we had, I mean, family was everything. That's how you was rich. But because of your family, because of the love that you had for each other, it didn't matter. Like you said, if you didn't have a tennis court or a jacuzzi or whatever, you had family, and family was everything to Henrietta.
Mm-hmm. And actually, that part of you, the way that you describe family gatherings really made me smile, because I'm thinking about my mother's DC family. My father's family was spread out through the eastern seacoast. So even though we were close, we didn't necessarily gather en masse the way that my mother's family in DC did. So my mother's lot, we were up in Connecticut. Her next sister's lot was up in Massachusetts. And every time we would come down to DC in the summer, we would spend 2 weeks and it was always a party.
Yeah.
Now, I come, you describe your family like to have parties and social gatherings and stuff. My mother's family was very similar. And it was any excuse. Baby had her first word. We having a party. Someone's kid got their first tooth or just learned how to walk. Ooh, we having a party. Barbara's kids are coming down. Barbara, Joe, and their kids are coming down from Connecticut. Jeannie's family's coming down from Massachusetts. We having lots of parties.
Yeah.
And I kind of miss those days. I feel as though the younger family members are kind of missing out on that. But literally any excuse to gather, and it seemed like your family was very similar.
Just like that. Yep. So, yep.
And
those were the days.
It definitely brought happiness to me because I'm a couple of years younger than Brian, but I can remember because my mom was the traveler in her family.
Mm-hmm.
So I can remember us coming back here, being with our family, living in Virginia Beach, traveling back here, and just being with my mom's in-law, because my mother's family is huge. And we would just go and we would have a cookout on S Street. S Street was the house. That was it. Everybody had a house that everybody went to all the time. So you definitely brought back some memories talking about that and just really getting into family and what we did when we were younger.
Right. No matter where did the family move to, Philadelphia, New York, Connecticut, we all conversed on Clover all over.
I love it.
So the way that your family found out that your grandmother's cells were not only still kind of living, they weren't the original cells, but cells that came from the cultures of hers, was insane. So and just for the audience as a synopsis, your mom happened to have brunch with a friend, that friend's sister, and and brother-in-law. And it was the brother-in-law who was a scientist who happened to mention HeLa cells. Right. And then take the story from there.
Yes, and when Miss Gardenia introduced my mother, Rebecca Lacks, the professor said, we're working with someone named Henrietta Lacks, HeLa cells. And my mother told him, that's my mother-in-law. So he started explaining all the things that they was doing with her cells and what her cells was accomplishing. And so my mother related back to my dad, which we wanted to find out what was going on. And this was back in 1973 when we found out. So that's when everything hit the fan. So Rolling Stones, Jet Magazine came to interview my family. And that's when they started talking to us. So once John Hopkins knew that it hit the fan, they sent some doctors and nurses to our home and drew some more blood from Henrietta's children. So, and they tried to explain it like, we want to make sure that you all didn't have the same cancer that your mother had, under that pretense, right? So we, my father and them didn't know, so they went on and gave it. You want to help. I mean, you want to help with HeLa cells and what they have been doing for the world. So they had, no problems in doing it. I mean, they were still a little skeptical because it took so long for the information to come out. But we still don't know what they did with that blood right to this day. So that's when my family just cut all ties with Johns Hopkins.
Because what Donnie and I like to do with the show is to humanize stories and humanize histories, because it's so easy to intellectualize things and take that kind of humanity out of them. Right. So I'm thinking about your poor mother, who is just expecting to have a normal brunch, like any other brunch that she's had. She hears this craziness, then has to go home and tell her husband 2 decades after his mother's died, honey, your mother's cells are still being used. How did your father take that news?
I mean, wow. I mean, first of all, my dad was traumatized how Henrietta died, because between the radiation and the cancer, something was eating her up from the inside out. And he witnessed that while my grandfather, David Lacks, was working at Bethlehem Steel. And so it brought, he just broke down all over again, thinking about his mother. So my mom, being the strong mom that she is, she navigated to try to find out, because my dad he didn't want to bring up them awful memories. So my mom, did a search and try to find out what was going on.
And staying with your father, he was am I correct in thinking that he was the executive of his mother's estate?
Back in 2010.
Okay. So I know that the kind of ethics and the laws back in the 1950s were different. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know what was breached and what wasn't. But you would have thought that someone would have reached out to the family to say, or at least the administrator, can we use these cells? And that conversation was never had.
Never happened. I mean, because of the broad scope of Henrietta's cells, I mean, it would have to come out. What are these? Where did these come from? You know what I mean?
So I got a question. So was it not had with your family, and was it had with Rebecca?
So say that again.
Was the conversation that Brian was talking about, was it not had with your family, but had with Rebecca?
It was had with Rebecca.
Yeah. So I wanted to point that out, because the main thing about this show is to talk about your book. Yes. We are also talking about Henrietta as a woman, as a person,
as a
what
person.
she's done. But we also want to point out how you guys lost the history of your family to this woman. She literally took over that history. So we have a lot of researchers on our show that watch things like this. I need you guys to think about that. And I need you guys to imagine not being able to tell the story about your family.
Well, if I can backpedal on that one just for a minute to get Ron to speak about that. So in the process of if you can explain through the process of Rebecca Skloot writing the book, how did some of your family members come to lose the rights to be able to tell the story of their own family?
Well, we've been dealing this for decades. And I'll never forget my uncle Sonny, David Lacks, and my dad talking. And Sonny was just, everybody needs to feed their family. So they figure, hey, we're not, they're not going to give in to us. They're not going to give us anything. So let's try to get what we can get. And that was the thoughts of my uncle. So he sold his rights away along with his children and his wife at the time. But my dad and I, we couldn't do that. The contract that they would have to sign, you had to give all your rights away to speak about Henrietta Lacks, and we didn't want to do that because we knew this day would come sometime because it was too important.
Yeah.
And John Hopkins, I like to say, John Hopkins really started this. They orchestrated everything. I mean, from bringing Miss Skloot in to be an overseer to the Lacks family. And she haven't left to this day. She still inserted herself into our family. Now, we're grateful that, she helped extend the about Henrietta. We are grateful to that. But how she categorized our family and talked about it, she even, in her book, she even minimized what Johns Hopkins did. So that's why I had to write my book, to get the true story out there.
But as Donia was saying, again, to those of our audience members who are family history researchers, always be careful about the contracts that you sign, and just imagine being in a position where you have actually signed something that says that you can no longer speak about your family. And just think about the repercussions and the ramifications from that.
Yeah.
And it went as far as to say if he was in another dimension. It was crazy.
What, really?
Yes.
That was in the contract.
Yes. I mean, it was way out there. It was way out there. Like I was on Star Trek or something. That's how
Now,
bad it was.
I can imagine. Now, keeping with on this subject, the thing that really disturbed me in the book was that the author of The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks set up, or it has something to do with the family foundation that
Yes.
a lot of you are locked out of. And that if you want to access funds from that, you have to go to her. And that just made me think, and again, because Donnie and I have research, we do a lot of enslaved people research.
Mhm.
And the immediate association I made is that's like having to go to a slave mistress to ask her for like a day out.
Yeah. Once again, overseer.
That's what she was. That's what she
trying to
is.
give it a nice. I'm trying to give it a nice word to be respectful for everybody. But that's exactly what she was. And you was capped off. You was capped off at $10,000. Now, once you got your $10,000, you cannot get any more. See you.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait, so you mean to tell me that y'all, whoever got $10,000, they can't get anything else after that?
That's right. That's right.
So I need so I'm hoping that the woman that posted the information about Rebecca Skloot saying that she shares her proceeds, you get 10,000 and that's it. You don't get anything else.
That's it. I think NIH gave them $1.7 million to help the Lacks family, and they used us as this draw to draw people in for donations and acting like they was given to us. I mean, like I said, it just goes back to look here, but they doing something over on this end. It was incredible how my family been treated.
Which is the perfect segue into the next portion of the show. So in 1997, and you write about this in the book, and I didn't doubt it, even though there weren't citations, because the rest of the book just rang so true and it resonated with some of the research that I had been doing. I didn't doubt any of this, but there was a 1997 documentary done by the British Broadcasting Corporation, BBC Two. And anyone who knows anything about the BBC knows that it is the gold standard of journalism, unquestioned. And I say that as a person who also has British citizenship. So I've enjoyed the BBC is my go-to for this kind of information. Not only validated a lot of what you said her cells have been used for, it even kind of broadcasted about uses of her cells that weren't in your book. So I just wanted to say, and this video is called The Way of All Flesh. It's done in 1997. It's on YouTube. I believe Donnie had just posted a link to that in our chat area. Everyone has to watch that documentary.
And that
now
came
I
out,
feel
when did it come out?
1997.
Yep, and that was way before Rebecca Skloot. She acted like she was the one that discovered all this, and brought this to the Lacks family attention, which is not true.
But the opening 2 minutes of that documentary actually made me tear up because I was trying to imagine what it must have been like for you to see that documentary. It actually showed period film of your grandmother's cells dividing. Those were her cells.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking, what would I feel like if I was her grandchild, knowing that what I'm looking at on TV is what's left of my grandmother?
Amazing.
I mean, how did you feel?
Amazing. I mean, that's all I got. I mean, it was just amazing. That's all I got. I mean, wow. It's like her soul is still covered in this world. It's just amazing to us. I mean, when me and you are long gone, Henrietta Cells will be doing something different. So that's why I had to change that narrative, because when someone looks up and find out, well, who is that woman? I didn't want them to refer back to Rebecca Skloot's book, which is not true. It got a lot.
That's so sad. That's really sad that you had to write this book to make sure people knew to come to you and not to Rebecca Skloot, because this ain't Rebecca's family. This is your family. Like I mean, my family's from Edgefield, South Carolina, and we tend to have violence in our lives. And jokingly, I think I might have to hurt her. Like I would not be able to. I would have a very serious problem with her,
Right. Yeah.
and I would have because to take my family's history, to take and to make it yours, and you don't even know it. You don't even feel me. You have nothing on me. I actually have this woman's genes, and yet you're getting her information. No, that's not going to work for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mhm.
crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to go into how her cells have been used up to the present day. So Donnie, if you can throw at the website with that timeline. And as Donnie is doing this, I would like to invite our audience to remember some of these facts. Germans had to own up to the horrific experimentations that were done on Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
And the patents, the pharmaceutical patents that came out of those horrific experiments. The Japanese had to also own up to the experiments that they did on the Chinese in the 1930s and the 1940s. Now, I don't know if Japan has ever paid China reparations for those experiments, but they too created pharmaceuticals out of some horrific experiments done on the Chinese and working with on Chinese cells. A lot of your your immediate family, a lot of your family members have not received a single penny from the cells that were harvested from Henrietta. Is that correct?
That's correct. Not a dime.
Okay, so Donnie, if you want to take the first one, so basically 1951 is where it all begins.
Right. Miss Lacks is 31, and you went for treatment for cancer at Johns Hopkins. During her treatment, they took cells from her tumor, and those cells were known as HeLa cells, and they would take it from the first two letters of her name, Henrietta
Ac-
Lacks.
And can you, I was a little bit confused about what was going on. They weren't originally attributed, the HeLa wasn't originally
Right.
attributed to Henrietta. Who created the name Helen Long?
Helen Lane.
Yeah, I think that was out there. That sound like John Hopkins probably did that. Helen Lawson, Helen Lane. But that procedure they did had no medical benefits of what they did to Henrietta. That was basically assault. They had assaulted her body when they took a part of her.
So as long as said it started in 1951. By 1953, 2 years later, they were already using those cells to lay the groundwork for the polio vaccine.
Polio vaccine, correct.
Okay, and then by 1956, this is when they started to understanding the effects of X-rays on human cells. So basically what was going on was that they would take radiation and put them onto her cells to see how we would react to them. So this was the beginning of her being just a medical mommy, and the one that was taking it all from like regular mommies do. She was taking it all in for us so that we could react better for her.
Yeah.
And my argument is whatever patents came off of that to improve X-rays, your family deserves money for that.
Yeah.
1956, still staying with 1956, those cells were used to also start to develop a whole range of cancer methodologies in terms of treatments. 1964, they were shot, literally, your grandmother's cells were shot into space. Her cells were in space before Elon Musk or Richard Branson even tried to go into space. And if I understand, it was both to understand what the effects of radiation in outer space, how that affected cells, and also with how zero gravity affected cells. If any patents came out of that research, your family's owed money.
Exactly. 1964, shedding light on treatments for blood disorders. So basically what this means is that they used her cells to study potential treatment that benefit different types of cancer, sickle cell anemia, and more. She was just I don't know. Okay, go ahead, Brian, because I'll get, you know me, I'll get.
Mhm. Carrying on, 1973, those same HeLa cells were used to determine how salmonella causes infections. So it really advanced the understanding of how salmonella affected human beings.
Right. Okay. So then making strides against cervical cancer that happened in 1985. They began, that's the HPV that we talk about now. And
Mhm.
this actually, her cells actually helped those discover that HPV can lead to cervical cancer and paved the way for development of one of the first anti-cancer vaccines. So your child taking those HPV vaccines that they do, thank Henrietta Lacks.
Mhm.
Yep.
Again, if you are a cancer survivor or a current cancer patient, in 1985, a drug called camptothecin. I butchered that. I'm sorry. It's a hard one to say. But basically, a medicine was produced and manufactured to slow the development of cancer cells, and that was done through using HeLa cells.
Yeah. And then advancing in 1988, understanding HIV. So when HIV first came out, they discovered that HeLa cells are not easily infected by HIV. I'm gonna say that one more time. She didn't even get infected by she wasn't, it wasn't easy for her to get infected by HIV. So using that information, the researchers gained important basic understanding of how HIV infection works. This knowledge later facilitates drug development aimed at limiting the spread of HIV. So anybody who has HIV, thank and they have a medicine that they're taking for it. Thank Henrietta Lacks.
Mhm. 1989, studies were conducted studying how certain enzymes in cells age human cells, and that research was done with HeLa cells.
Yeah. Exploring tuberculosis, how it makes people sick. The HeLa cells was, it says scientists use HeLa cells to see for the first time at the molecular level how tuberculosis make people sick. Tuberculosis is called diseases since ancient times, and it is thought to infect 25% of the world's population. So now she's taught us how it works, why you get sick from tuberculosis. That is another reason why to thank Henrietta Lacks, because TB is not out there like it was because they studied her cells.
Yep, 2001. Scientists use HeLa cells to develop a new and innovative single-cell microscopic imaging method, high-res imaging. You know, as soon as you hear those kind of words, you know a patent was filed for this
Almost
for
definitely.
this new technology.
Almost definitely. And according to this, because I can see it better than Brian can, there were four doctors that received the Nobel Prize in 2014. Dr. Eric Betzig, Dr. Stephen Hale, and Dr. William Morner. Three doctors, I'm sorry, that received the Nobel Prize for this
Mm.
particular.
You know, and I haven't seen their acceptance speech of the Nobel Prize, but it would if they didn't, it would have been nice if they had acknowledged your grandmother
Right.
for that, because without those cells, without her, they would not have had those awards.
Right.
And again, 2001 is the same story all over again, understanding the infectivity of both Ebola
And HIV.
and HIV. Oh, Don, you've got another Nobel Prize.
Oh, there too. These both
Hmm.
2008 and 2009 were awards awarded to her, to doctors because of certain cut showing viruses can cause certain cancers. So the movie will show you, the YouTube will show you how they thought originally that cancer was a virus, and that's why they thought that they could actually just, they could heal it, or they could cure it. But this is why this doctor was able to get his prize from it, as well as the other doctor. Same thing, researching certain areas to try to just thank Henrietta. That's all I can say.
Mhm. And I'm just going to rapidly just go through the remaining ones. So 2000. So here are these dates. 2010. Another cancer fighting drug developed from those cells. Again, research 2013. Now the one that absolutely blew me away was the COVID. They were using those cells to develop basically what's kind of saved our behinds in the COVID outbreak with the vaccines and the boosters. And those pharmaceutical companies file patents on their medicine, each and every one of them.
Right.
It really is mind numbing on that one. What's got left out of this, I'm currently researching this now. As I said, I've put on I'm not an investigative journalist, but I've put on my investigative journalist hat because I know how it's done. Cosmetic companies, so they could be. This is, sorry, you got my first, Danya. My cousin is very good at the site because when I get lost for words, that's my go-to place. My cousin's familiar with pretty much all of my different mms. Cosmetic companies, in a bid to be ethical, to not treat animals, they tested on your grandmother's cells.
Yeah, they did. They did. It's just amazing what she's done for us, and it's not being told. It's not being let known. I wanted. So, what segment are we at? Right.
Oh, we're still discussing the uses.
And again, can I just thank y'all again?
Ask questions. Yes.
Can I just thank y'all again? I mean, I would just like to say, it's people like you all that, this journey of mine was started at a low level, and it's slowly gaining momentum. And it's people like you all to help bring awareness, and I learned some things today from you all. So please, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, really.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Donnie, can you throw that question from Dawn Moore? Because that's a good question.
It is a very good question.
So we mentioned that also the HeLa cells were used to study sickle cell anemia, which is predominantly a blood-related disease for people of African descent. Your grandmother didn't have sickle cell, though, did she?
No.
Yeah. So again, for the audience, all of these non-cancer research that's been done in diseases, your grandmother didn't have tuberculosis. She didn't have any of this. She had cancer. That's all she had.
She had cancer. That's all she had.
And
that's all.
That's it. It was because of the way that her cells, they divided at a unusually fast rate. They were also very resistant to certain things. That's led to all of this experimentation.
Right. So we have a few questions. I want to get them, and then we're going to jump right back. So T. Michelle, she asked, where can you buy the book? So I want you to answer that.
It's on a lot of bookstores. It's at Amazon. You can go to my website, Henrietta Lacks, Untold.com.
Okay. And then Shelley Murphy asked, was the book by Rebecca Skloot accurate at all?
It had mostly about John Hopkins. It was a little accurate. Like I said, they what she did was just downplay some of the things that John Hopkins did, but she got most of the scientific stuff correct.
You see, now what frustrates me the most about Skloot's book is what we've just spent part of this last hour discussing. That should have been the story. That should have been the story, not kind of making up family history and putting judgment values on it. How those cells were used should have always been, because that would have been a mind-blowing book to just blow the lid off of everything.
Exactly.
And I feel that was and I really feel that was a missed opportunity.
She took it for herself, though. It was a very, because there's one thing that I want to get out to everybody. We haven't gotten to that point yet, so I'm not going to say it, but I need to make sure that I make that comment about the colleges and universities. Because
Oh
some
no,
of
go
them.
ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. Well, I'll say it now. Then I need for everybody to know and understand this. Rebecca receives money still to this day because there are several colleges and universities that require
Yep.
her book to be read. It's a
Mandatory.
requirement. Yep.
Yep.
It's a mandatory thing. So when I was talking to my mom about it, she was thinking about it at first and she was like, well, she was thinking on a high school level, I guess. They provide you the books. And I
Mhm.
was like, no, mom. And before I could finish, she was like, wait, every student has to buy a book. Exactly. Every student purchases a book.
Mhm.
So she is still making money hand over foot.
Mhm. Exactly.
And again, I cannot stress this enough. This is not about the money. But y'all, every nationality would be paid
Except us.
Except for.
except us.
Mhm.
That's what
Mhm.
I'm trying to get across. This is not about the money at
Mhm.
all. So yeah, I
Mhm.
wanted to say that.
And the thing that another part of your family history that made my mouth literally drop open was between a German, and you can discuss this in more detail, between a German DNA study and the National Institute of Health, your family's medical privacy has been breached because your kind of health information and your genetic health information is now out there in the public. And I really want people to realize what the repercussions of this could be. I'm not saying it has been, but it could be. This could affect how your healthcare provision
Yes.
because we have to pre-disclose family illness traits.
Mhm.
You don't even have to fill those forms in because your family's medical
Mhm.
issues are now out there.
Out there.
And any insurer, any unethical insurer, they're not supposed to do this, but if they wanted to research, oh, Lacks, Henrietta Lacks, I wonder if there's a connection. Oh,
Mhm.
let me take a look to see what's up with their cells.
Mhm.
Also, unethical employers are legally not supposed to do this, but if you get an unethical employer, they don't have to look very far to get detailed information about your family's medical conditions. I mean, how does that make you feel?
Well, that's not right. And the story behind that is Rebecca Skloot gave permission to do that. Basically, when me and my dad went to a meeting down there at Johns Hopkins Hospital, uh, and in the middle of the table was a conference call phone, and Rebecca Skloot was on it. So first thing my dad said was, "Look, this is a family matter. She do not belong here." Speaking about family matters, and they just ignored my dad and his attorney at the time because my dad told him no, he did not want to do a DNA sequencing on his family. But there again, our overseer, and I can't stress that enough, that she became our overseer, that she was in medical meetings and everything, advocating for the Lacks family, like she was in charge.
Mhm.
Mm, mm, mm.
Now, the other point that I want to make, and this is my opinion, it's not the show's opinion, it's not Donia's opinion, it's not the
It might
producer's
be.
opinion. This is my opinion. So if anyone wants to sue, they can sue me. Now, your family, Henrietta Lacks's memory is being honored through Congress by an award. I feel that Congress should do its research. They should find as many companies who are selling, and Donnie, if you throw that up in a couple of minutes, that comparison site, all of the companies selling HeLa cells in this country, any company that has profited through the research of using those HeLa cells, any company that has filed a patent based on their studies of HeLa cells should have to testify in Congress, and there should be a law, and it should be called the Henrietta Lacks Law, that this situation should never, ever happen again to anyone. It's my opinion.
That's,
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
It
So we
should.
have a few more questions up here. God, they were just pouring in. And I really like this question by Nancy Bray Washington. What about Oprah? What, she was involved with the telling of the story. So why don't you give your take on Miss Oprah Winfrey?
Well, when I spoke with Oprah, I mean, she was a really nice lady. She invited my family down to dinner, and we wanted to talk about Rebecca Skloot's book and how she betrayed some of the family members. So she said she was going to try to clean up the best she could, right? Uh, she was bamboozled by Rebecca Skloot. I mean, even on the morning show when she said my aunt was a little crazy. I mean, she couldn't have got that story from nowhere but Rebecca Skloot, because no friend, no family would have called my aunt crazy. So I kind of give her a little leeway, because she didn't take the family's position on how the book was misleading.
Mhm.
Now this is me. Then Brian did his thing. It's me. I blame her just as much as I blame Miss Blue, because she has the money and the means to do the research herself.
Exactly. Yep.
And as a journalist, which was what she was,
Yes, she
and
was.
she did investigative journalism,
Mm-hmm.
she should have researched it.
Mm-hmm.
And it really does not seem like it was researched. I've read Rebecca Skloot's book, and it sadly gave me the exact feeling that you're fighting against right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched her movie,
Mm-hmm.
and her movie did the exact thing
Yep.
that
It
Rebecca
did.
Skloot book did. So
It
I'm
did.
sorry. I blame her.
Yeah,
I
and
do.
I try to tread lightly, because I mean I found out I'm blacklisted in Hollywood, and I know no one up there, right? A
That's
friend of
crazy.
mine that I went to school with over at Northern, and she said, "Ron, you did a book." I said, "Yeah." She said, "Oh man, I would like to do a documentary and blah blah blah." I said, "Well, there's a lot of people trying to block me." So she said, let me speak to somebody that's in that industry, and I'll get back with you and let you know." A week later, she called me back and said, "Ronnie, I love my job.
Wow.
Wow.
I'm at the pass." So yeah, so that's why I try to. I mean, I just noticed the resistance that I felt throughout this whole ordeal. Me and my wife. I mean, she the only one that, helped pushing me forward. I mean, it took a lot to keep moving. I almost gave up a couple times. A lot of family members have passed away. My dad is the only one left. So, and if I had gave up, all this would have been lost to history. So,
Mhm.
I had something divine pushing me forward, and I thank Henrietta for that, because I think she was the one. Her soul is in all of us right now. Is it
Yes,
all of
she
us?
Mm.
is. She
And
is.
the case in point to what Donnie was just speaking about how some of your family members, your aunts and uncles have been portrayed. I go back to that BBC Two documentary, The Way of All Flesh, where your Aunt Dale, your Aunt Babette, two of your uncles were interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Your Aunt Dale was in no way, and this, it's them. It's not reenactments. It's not actors or actresses speaking. This is them.
Yep.
The way that she, the way that she came across in the interview is not. I didn't recognize the woman that was written about or portrayed on film.
Exactly.
And two things can't be true simultaneously. The other thing that, again, because again, your family was portrayed in a certain way in the book, and again, this is not casting aspersions about how different dialects amongst African Americans or how we speak or anything like that. And again, I go back to saying there is nothing wrong with being poor. The people in that documentary were a very articulate people. Yeah, there was a bit of a Virginia accent, but they spoke clearly, they spoke standard English, and it just did not jive in any way, shape, or form with
Mm-hmm.
what was being portrayed.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why, and this is where we get into our genealogy, and we put on our genealogy hats. And the reason being, the reason why she did that was because everybody knows that his grandparents were related to each other. Now, again, Ron, I don't want you to feel bad about that at all, because my mama got a aunt who married her first cousin without any problem. They lived next door to each other. They did it. I can speak it. I'm not ashamed of it. It's what happened. It was reasons for it. And whatever reasons, it happened. But what I want to get across, and every person that's on our show, that every in our virtual audience, they understand that. But the other thing that I want to get across that every person on this virtual show understands is that white people did it too. And she portrayed it in the book as if the reason why you guys were not that intelligent, that you were poor, that you were this, is because of that reason, that they married family. Family has been marrying family for centuries. For centuries.
And I don't care what race they would have identified as, because Donnie and I have it all day, every day. Our white, black, mixed race, all of our family, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Georgia, cousins marrying cousins, generation after generation after generation.
That's right. And see, there's someone just put up, what's her name? Gwen Smalls. It's legal in Virginia to marry your first cousin. I have a whole chart on that, because when I wrote my book, I talked about everybody marrying, who was marrying who, and so on and so forth. There's an entire chart that I can share with you where they shut it down. When I originally wrote my book in 2017, it was a government page that I got it from. Now it's Wikipedia.
And
they said no changes were going to be made to it at that point.
And any long-time audience member of our show knows, Donnie and I have joked about this for the 5 seasons that our show has been on air. Our trees have broken ancestry because of the volume of cousin marriages, starting with our Quaker ancestors, and then our top one, the 1%, the slaveholders of Virginia, right on down.
Yeah, we have. I mean, and when he says broken ancestry, just recently I just found out I have a cousin that I just added, and he's related both on my mother's side and my mother's father's side. But Ancestry can only show me his relation on her father's side. They're calling him on her mother's side. They're just calling him somebody that someone that married in. But then when you look above and you look at her dad is listed as my mother's great granduncle. So she's related. So why can't you do it? They literally can't do it. It's just too hard. So I need for Miss Skloot to know that I'm quite sure if we dug into her research too, we will find somebody who married a cousin. And that doesn't do anything to anybody.
And like I said, I guess my frustration about the whole thing is that really shouldn't have been the focus, and that really shouldn't have been the story.
And let me say this, back to Johns Hopkins, because they orchestrated all of this by them recruiting Rebecca Skloot, and they gave her access to everything which my family couldn't have access to. I mean, to set the narrative, and that they wanted us to be as unapproachable as possible, and that's what she tried to accomplish in her book. That these, all of these people, they uneducated. They and when my family started going to book signings with Miss Skloot, they noticed that something wasn't right here. From what she was explaining in the book, it didn't match up with how us meeting the Lacks family. So that was a good sign right there that people was noticing, even from Henrietta's iconic picture, her and my grandfather. When I was coming up as a child, walking past that picture, I never looked at her and seen a poor black farmer that was uneducated and didn't sign her name with that. I looked at her, she was like a movie star to me as a child. So, I grew up with that picture. So, I mean, and a lot of people that seen it for the first time say, yeah, I don't get that. He was scratching their head. They don't get it. I don't see it.
Poor people don't wear fur stoles.
No,
They don't.
no, they don't tend to.
No, they don't.
They don't. Now, there is legal proceedings going on, so you can't really talk about that.
Right.
But how much can you say kind of where you are in that process?
I mean, look, 70 years, 70 years, and my family finally got to walk through them courtroom doors. This is a day that was lifted off my shoulders, that I knew I was doing the right thing when I wrote the book, right? That I finally got this through them doors, and my ancestors probably smiling right now because it took 70 years.
Mm.
Now, once there is a ruling, is this going to set a historic precedent?
This whole case is unprecedented. I mean, it was just great to hear oral arguments. It was just great to hear it.
That's
I mean,
awesome.
Okay.
this was his history in the making. So, I mean, people that witnessed that were seeing something that will go down in history.
Okay. So in terms of the court case, are you still more in the beginning of it? Are you kind of in the middle? Or are you kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel?
No, we still at the beginning. We still at the beginning, and we just hopeful. I mean, we can't. Henrietta has been such a positive impact on the world, so we can't help but know that this is going to have a good outcome, regardless how it goes. This got to have a good outcome. It has to. It's too divine.
One person asked who your lawyer was. It is Mr. Ben Crump.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really working towards helping you. And I pray that you guys get what you deserve. And mainly, I pray that you get her story back. I find that to be terrible.
Mm-hmm. This book got the attention of Mr. Ben Crump, Mr. Chris Seeger, and the family is so grateful that they took up this case. They're two dynamic lawyers that seen the injustice of unjust enrichment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, keeping that in mind, in the closing minutes of the show, there is going to be a segment of I can't even say the American population. There will be a percentage of people who are going to respond to this episode and to what we've been talking about as Black people wanting money for nothing. What do you have to say to them?
I mean, that's been saying for years. So I paid no attention to that because Henry Ford's children, they get benefits from what he did. So I mean, why can't Henrietta's children get the same? I mean, it's always a double standard when it comes to Black people. Come on now. Let's all play nice and together, because so many people have been saved through my grandmother. So do the right thing. That's all we ask.
Right. And I'm glad you said that part, that so many people have been saved by your grandmother. So they cannot say wanting something for nothing, because there was it was something done.
Exactly. I mean, what mother would not want their children be taken care of? If I cut my arm off and it helps humanity and do this and do that, all I say, man, look out for my children, look out for my kids.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't want that? Come on.
Yeah.
And again, it's another form, African Americans have historically had problems in creating generational wealth, because we, by and large, until modern times, we weren't really given that opportunity. And really that's at the core of it. That's what this is about. Mm-hmm. Is this, considering how your grandmother's cells were used, part of this is about creating that generational wealth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, I just want to thank you again, because this hour is over, and I think you said you were doing a second book. So when you do that second book, you let us know.
There you go. It got to be a victory. I mean, this story has been so long, so it got to come to an end, and I think we're on the right road to that.
I'm so happy. So again, you guys, we are so excited about Mr. Lacks being on the show, and we thank you for joining us and talking with him. And thank you. And don't hang up. Don't close your.
Please have me back. Well, please have me back when we come out of court.
It'll
One
be
more
an
time.
honor. Unfortunately, everyone, that has been a rapid fire hour. We have run out of time. We don't even have time to introduce the next show. All I can say is we'll be right here next Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend.
Yes, don't hang up. Okay, bye, guys.
Bye-bye.